You look at a place like Kingsbury, Indiana, and you see a pretty typical Rust Belt town. Flat farmland, slow-moving rivers, quiet. But if you look a little closer, you start to realize there's a story here, a really big one, buried right under the surface. And today, we're going to dig it up. Because that stillness, it isn't peaceful. It's heavy. You can feel it, and you can see it too. There are these clues scattered everywhere, old concrete bunkers just heaving up out of the ground, the skeletons of giant factories on the horizon. The landscape itself is telling you that something huge happened here, and then was just left to die. So what is that story? I mean, how does a small farming community suddenly become home to a massive munitions plant, a catastrophic industrial disaster, and an environmental mystery that spans decades? That is the big question we are going to unpack layer by layer. All right, so our first buried truth begins back in World War II with a factory that was built for war and then, almost as quickly, forgotten. So, it's 1941, and the federal government decides it needs this huge piece of land to build a munitions plant. And to get it, they gave 250 farming families just 30 days. 30 days to pack up their entire lives, their homes, their farms, everything, and just leave, all in the name of the war effort. And the speed of it all was just staggering. The Kingsbury Ordnance Plant was the definition of a boom town. It was built, it ramped up, and then it was abandoned, all in less than 20 years. And that incredibly fast cycle of creation and then decay, it would end up defining this town forever. And what a boom it was. At its absolute peak, this place employed almost 21,000 people. And get this, about half of them were women, who were celebrated with this popular mascot, Tilly the TNT Girl. But, of course, the boom didn't last. Once the wars were done, the jobs dried up, and this industrial titan was just left to rust. Okay, so that's the heroic war story, right? But it hides a much darker, much more toxic legacy. And that's our second buried truth. The ground under Kingsbury is soaked with poison from two completely different eras. So this isn't just one bad event. Think of it like a toxic layer cake. The first layer is from the military, widespread waste for making bombs, mostly TNT. Then, in the 70s, private industry came in and dumped a whole new, much nastier layer on top. We're talking super concentrated chemicals, solvents, cyanide, PCBs, the really bad stuff that's now banned. It's a mess. And all that industrial negligence literally exploded in 1978. A massive fire at the Fisher-Callow chemical plant was so bad it sent a toxic cloud over the whole area, forcing thousands of people from their homes. I mean, this was a disaster you just couldn't ignore. It's what finally put Kingsbury on the map as a federal Superfund site, one of the most polluted places in the country. So that brings us to today, and to our third buried truth. And honestly, this might be the most unsettling part of the whole story. It's about the town's drinking water. See, on paper, the water in Kingsbury is totally legal. It meets federal standards. But here's the catch, and this is a quote straight from the EPA. Their standard is basically a trade-off between the potential health effects and how much it costs to clean the water. Let that sink in. It creates this huge, dangerous gap between what's legally allowed and what's actually safe for you to drink. And this chart just shows you how massive that gap is. That tiny little bar on the left, that's what modern science says is a safe level for arsenic. The huge bar on the right, that's the legal limit, which hasn't been updated in over 20 years. The difference is just, it's shocking. So what does this gap mean for the people who actually live there and drink the water? It means the arsenic levels are 250 times higher than what scientists today consider safe. The water is legal, yes, but it is not safe. So the obvious question is, how does a threat this big stay buried for so long? And that brings us to our fourth buried truth. It turns out there's a real art to hiding poison, and it involves some pretty shocking tactics to conceal the contamination and avoid taking the blame. It all starts with the land itself. See this complex network of ditches and streams? They were originally dug for farming, to drain the fields. But that system was also the perfect tool for something way more sinister. Here's how the alleged scheme worked. It was called waterway laundering. Polluters would give contaminated industrial waste to local farmers, calling it cheap fill. The farmers would spread it on their land. Then the rain would come and wash all those toxic chemicals into the ditches and streams, and out into the public watershed. Just like that, the poison was off the company's property, diluted across the landscape, and the original site could pass an inspection and be sold. And that wasn't the only trick up their sleeves. There were redevelopment shell games where they'd allegedly just pave right over the contamination, then sell the property through a confusing maze of shell companies to hide who owned it. Or burying spoil, where they'd supposedly pass off toxic waste as part of a conservation project. They were literally using environmental programs to hide hazardous materials. They even played games with the language in official reports. You see, early documents from the Department of Defense clearly named TNT as a problem. That's a specific chemical, a direct link to military bomb making. But in later reports, that term magically changes to the super vague energetic residues. It's a subtle shift, but it's a brilliant way to muddy the waters and make it harder to trace the poison back to its source. So after peeling back all these layers, it becomes crystal clear. Kingsbury isn't just some local story about one town. It's a really powerful cautionary tale about how frighteningly easy it is to bury the truth, and how incredibly hard it is to ever dig it back up again. And our fifth and final truth is this. This story isn't just based on rumors or speculation. It's built on a mountain of evidence, a paper trail that's been painstakingly pieced together from decades of military documents, EPA files, old county health records, and newspaper archives. The facts have always been there, just waiting for someone to connect the dots. For 80 years, the full story of what happened in Kingsbury was hidden in plain sight. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What toxic legacies, what forgotten histories are buried just beneath your feet?